Let's get back to our life divine. So, I'm reading each sentence and then you will tell me whether it's clear. Okay. So, or before that, shall we do one thing? Shall we go quickly through the summary of the previous one? We'll do that. Okay. So, I'm reading out the summary of what he said earlier. Okay. In paragraph 13. Once we admit a divine government of the universe, we have to also say that the power to govern is absolutely effective. Because in our conception of the divine, it is not that he has got limited powers, he has got absolute powers. He is the absolute. Therefore, he has the power also to govern. Whatever he creates, he is fully in control of that. Otherwise, we would have to redefine our conception of the divine. Okay, he has created something and he doesn't have control over that. Okay, so a divine without absolute knowledge and power is no divine. That's what he has said in the previous. But these are my words, but that's what he has said. Then, just 1 second. Yeah. A divine without absolute knowledge and power is no divine. So we have started with the conception that the divine is absolute power, Sat Chit Shakti Ananda. Yet it is possible that the divine power may delegate a certain independence and freedom of action to that which the divine has created within himself. Okay? It is like a son, a father who has a son. He has produced a son exactly like the God is producing the physical world, but he tells the son, "You are free partly to do what you want." Okay? So that's what he's saying. Yet it is possible that the divine power may delegate a certain independence and freedom of action to that which the divine has created within himself. Okay? And that could be several things. Number one, an ignorant, inconscient nature. He creates an ignorant, inconscient nature and says, nature, okay, you have the power to do whatever you want. Mechanically, you can go on doing whatever you want. This is number one. Secondly, the other possibility, he creates a human limited mind and will. Okay, that also he can do. And a third possibility, a conscious power or force of darkness and evil, which bases itself on the reign of inconscience. The divine has created that. You can think of it in that way. But none of these can be absolutely self-existent or independent by themselves. Why is Sri Aurobindo giving all these which are almost a contradiction of what he is saying? Because they are real philosophies in the world. Okay, that's what people. All these theories are there in the world. Okay? So the Mayavadins, they can't. There's a total difference, a total opposition between spirit and matter. That's why he's saying that all these things are there. Then the Christians also say that the divine has created evil and heaven and earth is there. So all these possibilities are there. But then Sri Aurobindo picks up his own and he says, but none of these theories can be absolutely self-existent or independent by themselves. In other words, he creates all these things by his own will, okay, and he is allowing it. Okay? So, but none of these can be absolutely self-existent or independent by themselves. They all derive their existence, their power, their knowledge from the divine original creator. Whatever their action, they must have all been sanctioned passively by the creator. Okay? He has sanctioned them. Okay? Why? That's a question that again you have to deal with. Every time you say something, there are questions that arise and you have to deal with those questions. Some freedom and independence to their actions and forces is possible, but it is all done within the ambit of the creator, with his assent. Okay? He has agreed to that. Why is a question, but that's why 1,000 pages of Lakshmi. Okay. Why did the Supreme Being allow such a creation of imperfection? This is the basis from which the problem has to be solved. Okay? Without dodging any inconvenient implications. We have to admit that whatever has been created by the divine himself. There is no opposition. He has created that himself. So we have to explain that. And that's what he will do slowly. Okay? Now I read the para that we have to read today. And first, we must realize that the existence of ignorance error, limitation, suffering, division and discord in the world need not by itself, as we too hastily imagine, to be a denial or a disproof of the divine being, consciousness, power, knowledge, will, delight in the universe. He is saying that the presence of some imperfection does not mean that the divine is not there. Suppose he has permitted that to happen, just like a son, okay, need not take absolutely like his father. He has got different things. So the son is allowing the father is allowing the son to do something what he is doing, but yet he has to submit to the family discipline. Okay, so that's what Srimad is saying. They need not. You need not conclude that because suffering is there, there is no God. You can't say that. You have to explain why suffering has come, but you need not conclude that he is not there. Okay, so. They can be that, they can be independent if we have to take them by themselves separately. But we have said that everything is one, so we can't take that separately. The Sridhar is admitting that it's possible to take them separately, and that's what the others do. Christianity, Islam, Mayavadins, Buddhism, they all do that. They take it as though they are totally separate from themselves. But need not be taken so if we get a clear vision of their place and significance in the complete view of the universal workings. If you take a higher view, you can take, depends on your view from where you are seeing. It's, everything is relative. Even science is telling you that your view of things is relative, depending upon your position from where you are seeing. Okay? It's very simple. If you see something from a horizontal position, a line also can become like a point, and you go a little up and that point becomes a line. Okay, so it's exactly the same way. Even a circle, okay, take a circle, it's on one plane, and if your eyesight is on the horizontal level of that circle, you will see it as a line. But if you go up a little, you will see it as a circle. So depending on how you are seeing, and in consciousness also, it depends at which level it is. Then you see things in a different way. It's not that the others are wrong. Okay? It's that they are seeing in a different way. That's all. Okay? So there is a truth to Buddhism, there is a truth to Mayavadin, but those truths are partial. But you have to take a stand where you can see the whole and the parts. If you see only the whole, then there is a problem. If you see only the parts like we are seeing, there is a problem. So you have to go to level, third level, where you see both the whole and the parts. Okay. Then you see the reality of things. Now, I go on to the next para. Not para, sentence. Okay. A part broken off from the whole may be imperfect, ugly, incomprehensible. But when we see it in the whole, it recovers its place in the harmony. It has a meaning and a use. So even suffering, evil has got a use. Okay? And very simple, if you admit, evil, when you are at a very low level of consciousness, you indulge in evil. But as your consciousness grows, because there's an evolution, as the consciousness grows from an animal to a human level, then you feel the necessity of getting rid of your evil. So evil has got a purpose. It is pushing you towards perfection. Just like an obstacle challenges man to override, to conquer the obstacle. So even obstacles have got their own functions. That's exactly what he's saying. So the divine, a part broken off from the whole may be imperfect, ugly, incomprehensible. But when we see it in the whole, it recovers its place in the harmony. It has a meaning and a use. The divine reality is infinite in its being. In this infinite being, we find limited being everywhere. Okay? The universe itself is infinite. Even the physical universe is infinite. But you see limited things in it. Stones, trees, animals, okay? So, everything you see limited. The divine reality is infinite in its being. In this infinite being, we find limited being everywhere. That is the apparent fact from which our existence here seems to start, and to which our own narrow ego and its egocentric activities bear constant witness. When we are in the ego consciousness, we see only parts. We don't see the connection between the parts. But in reality, when we come to an integral self-knowledge, we find that we are not limited, for we also are infinite. Again, we come back to that. The finite houses the infinite within itself in a subtle way. And the infinite also has the possibility of creating the finites. Okay? Those famous lines from again. You go on repeating those lines, no? From Blake. So, our ego is only a face of the universal being and has no separate existence. Our apparent separative individuality is only a surface movement, and behind it, our real individuality stretches out to infinity with all things and upward to oneness with the transcendent divine infinity. Now, that's an interesting sentence. We'll have a look at that. Our ego is only a face, one aspect of the universal being and has no separate existence. To understand this sentence, you can give the image of the sea and the wave to yourself. Okay, this wave is very real. Okay, and it is moving. It's a symbol of the physical things in the physical world. Okay, a stone, or these are all things which you see. As a wave is only a part. It's not the whole sea. Yet, when it falls at the shore, it becomes the sea. Okay? So, the wave and the sea are intimately related. The universal and the particular are very much related. That's what he's saying. Our ego is only a face of the universal being and has no separate existence. The wave disappears into the sea. Our apparent separative individuality is only a surface movement. And behind it, that's the whole point. Behind the wave is the sea. Okay? Behind it, our real individuality stretches out to infinity with all things and upward to oneness with the transcendent divine unity. So I'm just saying two things here. He often speaks about it as a horizontal extension and a vertical extension. So the horizontal extension is what science is doing. At the same physical level, it is going into more and more knowledge of things everywhere. Its knowledge base is increasing, but it is horizontal. It knows more and more about the physical. Now it has gone to the level of the life, and there again it is exploring more and more. So as it keeps climbing, that will be the vertical. Okay, the yogi is concentrating on the vertical extension, and the scientist is working on the lateral extension of the horizontal extension. That's what he's saying here. See carefully. Our apparent separative individuality is only surface movement, and behind it is our real individuality, stretches out to unity with all things. That's a horizontal. Stretches out to unity with all things. I realize that I am one in everybody, the cosmic consciousness. That's a horizontal expansion. And upward to oneness with the transcendent divine infinity, that's the vertical expansion. So, thus our ego, which seems to be a limitation of existence, is really a power of infinity. Our limited thing is a power of infinity. We must not, that's why Swayambhu says, never belittle the little. Okay, it is as powerful as the. There are two, one in poetry and one in Life Divine. He says the divine creates the hurtling cosmos, okay, all these stars and everything, the infinite, and at the same time he is paying same attention to the anthill. If you remember in Life Divine itself, it is there much earlier. Then in his poetry, he says the same thing. Okay? In that poem, Who? What does he say? The hand that sent Jupiter hurling through heaven, not hurling, what is it? Whirling, I think it is. The hand that sent Jupiter whirling through heaven spends all its cunning to fashion a curve. So the infinite and the finite are very much limited. United. So that's what he's saying here in different words. Okay. So is really a power of the infinity. The boundless multiplicity of things in the world is a result and signal evidence. Signal important. Signal in evidence, not of limitation or of finiteness, but of that illimitable infinity. And this is realized by many people who see the reality. Okay, that's why the famous 4 lines is very useful to remember that. No? To see a world in a grain of sand, a world in a grain of sand, and heaven in a wild flower. The wild flower is limited, heaven is unlimited. To hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. All time can be found also in 1 second. Okay, that's it. Apparent division can never erect itself into a real separateness. Apparent division only. It's like the jigsaw puzzle, which is a big picture which has been cut into small parts. Now, if you are very near the picture, you will see only the parts. But if you keep going farther and farther away, okay, farther, then you start slowly seeing the whole picture. Then you understand that, oh, this little jigsaw puzzle part is part of the whole. Now I understand its function. If it is not there, there is something missing. Okay, so that's what he's saying. This fundamental world fact of ego and apparent division and their separative workings in the world existence is no denial of the divine nature of unity and indivisible things. They are the surface results of an infinite multiplicity, which is the power of the infinite oneness. Again, the image of the sea can very much help. There are waves on the surface. On the surface, there is movement, and there are waves, and each wave is separate from the other. It's a surface phenomena, but there are no waves deep down in the sea. No? There are currents also in the middle level of sea. There are currents that too, but deep down, I am assuming that there is no movement and there is absolutely stability. So that's what Shendra is saying here. This fundamental world fact of ego, world fact, not ultimate fact, world fact, physical fact of ego and apparent division and their separative workings of world existence is no denial of the divine nature of unity and indivisible being. They are the surface results of an infinite multiplicity, which is the power of the infinite oneness. In other words, the infinite oneness has the power to limit itself. That's the manifestation. Okay, so we have plenty of time. We read the next one. There is Shall I read? Yeah, please.
Archana,
if she is in a position to read, surely she will read.
Okay.
No, Shilpa, you can read.
Okay. Okay. I will read.
Go ahead.
There is then no real division or limitation of being, no fundamental contradiction of the omnipresent reality. But that does seem to be real limitation of consciousness. There is an ignorance of self, a veiling of the inner divinity, and all imperfection is its consequence. For we identify ourselves mentally, vitally, physically with this superficial ego consciousness, which is our first insistent self-experience. This does impose on us not a fundamentally real, but a practical division with all the untoward consequences of that separateness from the reality. But here again, we have to discover that from the point of view of God's workings, whatever be our reactions or our experience on the surface, this fact of ignorance is itself an operation of knowledge and not a true ignorance. Its phenomenon of ignorance is a superficial movement, for behind it is an indivisible all consciousness. The ignorance is a frontal power of that all consciousness, which limits itself in a certain field, within certain boundaries to a particular operation of knowledge, a particular mode of conscious working, and keep back all the rest of its knowledge in waiting as a force behind it. All that is thus hidden is an occult store of light and power for for the all consciousness to draw upon for the evolution of our being in nature. There is a secret working which fills up all the deficiencies of the frontal ignorance, act through its apparent stumbling, prevents them from leading to another final result than that which the all knowledge has decreed, helps the soul in the ignorance to draw from its experience, even from the natural personalities, sufferings, and errors, what is necessary for its evolution and to leave behind what is no longer utilizable. This frontal power of ignorance is a power of concentration in a limited working, much like that power in our human mentality by which we absorb ourselves in a particular object and in a particular work, seem to use only so much knowledge, only such ideas as are necessary for it. The rest, which are alien to it or would interfere with it, are put back for the moment. Yet in reality, all the time it is invisible consciousness which, which we are that has done the work to be done, seen the thing that has to be seen. That and not any fragment of consciousness or any exclusive ignorance in us is the silent knower and worker. So is it too with this frontal power of concentration of of the all consciousness within us.
Yeah. Okay, we got enough time. So I'll do one thing. I will summarize the thing quickly and then we'll go to each sentence. Because very interesting. For instance, silent knower and worker. Okay. Now, if I ask you to give me a different word for silent knower and worker, what will you say? Okay. Silent knower, he is using a different word altogether, but it means Purusha. Okay. It means the self. And worker, the Prakriti. Prakriti is the one that is working. So that's why I go to each sentence separately, and each word also. See, when he's saying worker, it means who is working, that means he is in movement, and that means Prakriti, that means the physical world. Silent knower, the self, silent. He knows, he has consciousness, but he is inactive, silent. Okay? That's why, same those language, we have to go deep into behind the words and see. That is the reason why we go sentence by sentence. Okay, so I'll quickly read out the summary of what he said here. We get the gist, we get the whole picture, and then we go into details. Okay. So, just 1 second. Yeah. So, what he's saying here, the division of the essential one that we experience here in the world is only a superficial, frontal phenomenon. It is not the real division. It is not a real division. We see the waves, but we don't see the sea. When we are concentrating on the wave, we are aware vaguely of the sea as something that is throwing up the wave. Okay? But in our consciousness, we do experience a limitation resulting in ignorance. We all know that we have got limited capacities, limited consciousness, limited knowledge, limited power also. We can't do everything that we want. Okay? The divine, the inner divinity is indivisible to our gaze. The imperfection that we see in the world is a consequence of our limited consciousness. If your instruments of knowledge is limited, naturally you will see limitedness. That's what he's saying. Okay? If I use an instrument, I use a telescope, I can see only that which the telescope is revealing to me. The telescope can't reveal the whole universe to me. It's only that portion that we are seeing. So when our consciousness, limited consciousness is seeing, it is seeing only limited things. That's what he's saying. Very easy to understand. We willingly identify ourselves with our body, our life and our mind, and the result is a practical division of the indivisible one. It's a practical division, not an essential division. Practical. We have to understand that our ignorance is not a fundamental reality. It is changeable. It is the power of the divine knowledge to limit and make itself less and to do the limited work at hand. We'll discuss this a little bit. We have discussed it many times, but it bears repetition. Okay? Just as darkness is a power of light to diminish itself, so too is the ignorance of man. So too is the ignorance of man. It's a ignorance is nothing but the power of knowledge to limit itself. Why limit itself? Again, we go back one step. Manifestation implies limitation. And limitation implies so-called imperfection. It is not negative. It's a positive power to concentrate on the task at hand and not to be distracted by unnecessary and extraneous knowledge, all of which is put away into the background. It is ready to be retrieved with effort. That's what he's saying. So it is very clear. Suppose I am a mechanic, okay, and I know so many things, but when I am concentrating on the repairing the motorcycle, I am concentrating only on that. Now I don't remember. I know who my father is, I know who my mother is, I know where I live. But is that all in your mind consciously at that time? No. You are limiting yourself to the work to be done at hand. So when you are manifesting, that's what the divine does. He limits himself. Okay? And that limiting itself is very necessary because the universe is a very limited form of the infinite. Oh, you may argue that the physical world is infinite also, but there are levels of infinities. Even mathematics tells you that. Level 1 of infinity, level 2 of infinity, level 3 of infinity. There also the levels are also infinite. Very difficult for the mind to understand what is limit, okay, and what is infinite. So that is the what Sunil is saying. And I usually give the example, interesting example of knocking a nail into a wall, okay? So how much power do I need to use that? It's a very small work. I have to only put a small nail into the wall. So if I use too little power, I will fail. And if I use too much power, again the whole wall will break. So the divine has to tailor, he has to manipulate his force to suit the work at hand. And the physical world is limited. Therefore, he has to use limited power, limited consciousness, and limited ananda. If he does not do that, there will be total chaos. He will be breaking the wall. That's what he's saying in the paragraph. Okay? So now we can go back to the beginning of the. We'll look at all the words and analyze the words that he's using. So, there is then no real division or limitation of being. You see it from a different point of view, but it is not real. It is your problem of your own consciousness and limitation, not the objective world. The objective world, there is no division. Okay? So, no fundamental contradiction of the omnipresent reality. Then how does Buddhism and how does Mayavadin and how do the others see that? Okay, that's because they limit themselves to one field. Okay, even the the Jains and the Buddhists, they all say there is no God. Okay, because what they are saying is absolutely right, but when they deny something, that can be questioned. Okay, because you are not going to another level of consciousness. From your level, what you are saying is absolutely correct, but not the total reality. So, there is no real division or limitation of being, no fundamental contradiction of the omnipresent reality. But there does seem to be a real limitation of consciousness. Because when you look at yourself, you see that I don't have the power to do this, okay? I don't have the power to do that. There's so much limitation. There is an ignorance of self, a veiling of the inner divinity. We don't see our own soul, we don't see. And all imperfection is its consequence. When you see something limited, your power to act also becomes limited. For we identify ourselves mentally, vitally, physically with the superficial ego consciousness, which is our first insistent self-experience. Note the word insistent. It is so compelling that you have to think that yes, I am body-mind. This does not impose on us, this does impose on us not a fundamental real, but a practical division. Now there is a difference between the real and the practical. These are the words also that Shankara uses. Vyavaharika satta, the truth of the practical truth. Vyavaharika satta. And paramarthika satta, the essential truth, the highest truth. But real truth and practical truth. A practical division with all the untoward consequences of that separateness from the reality. But here again, we have to discover that from the point of view of God's workings, that means at the highest level, whatever be our reactions or our experience on the surface, This fact of ignorance is itself an operation of knowledge and not a true ignorance. It's an operation of knowledge. Knowledge has the power to limit itself. Its phenomenon of ignorance is a superficial movement, very, very superficial. For behind it is an indivisible all consciousness. Again, the image of the sea and the waves becomes very interesting. It becomes absolutely practical. The wave is only a limitation of the ocean. Okay? And you see it and then it disappears. But another wave comes up. So the physical world you are seeing constantly, but their forms are going on changing there. But the universe does not disappear. The sea does not disappear. The sea is real, but the waves in it are not real. They are only semi-real. They are real as long as they last. Its phenomenon of ignorance is a superficial movement. For behind it is an indivisible all consciousness. Behind the wave is the sea supporting it. If there is no sea, there can be no wave. And yet we concentrate only on the wave and think that that's the reality. For behind it is an indivisible all consciousness. The ignorance is a frontal power of that all consciousness which limits all consciousness. All consciousness, total consciousness of everything, which limits itself in a certain field, within certain boundaries, to a particular operation of knowledge, a particular mode of conscious working, and keeps back all the rest of its knowledge in waiting as a force behind it. I give you the example of one thing. We are all concentrating on the life divine now, but we have forgotten that we have brothers and sisters at home, and Yasmin also has a son who is working at somewhere. She is not concentrating on that when she is looking at the sentences in life divine. She has limited her understanding only to that field. All that is thus hidden is an occult store of light and power for the all consciousness to draw upon for the evolution of our being and nature. The sea is there and the wave can decide whether it wants to be a small wave or a big wave. It depends on you. There is a secret working which fills up all the deficiencies of the frontal ignorance. Okay? All the deficiencies can disappear. You can enlarge yourself. Acts through its apparent stumblings, prevents them from leading to another final result than that which the all knowledge has decreed. The divine has decreed that I will limit myself in objects, but I am not going to disappear. The sea will produce the waves, but it is not going to disappear. Helps the soul in the ignorance to draw from its experience, even from the natural personalities, sufferings and errors. What is necessary for its evolution is to leave behind what is no longer utilizable. So what you have outgrown the utility of something, give it behind. This frontal power of ignorance is a power of concentration in a limited working, much like that power in our human mentality by which we absorb ourselves in a particular object and in a particular word and seem to use only so much knowledge, only such ideas as are necessary for it, that limited work. Okay? The limited work needs a limited consciousness. The rest, which are alien to it or would interfere with it, are put back for the moment. Now that sentence also, see how accurate Srindu is. The rest, okay, which are alien to it. In other words, I have knowledge which I am not using, but I also don't have knowledge which I am not using. Okay, I don't know my own soul, but I know so many other things which I am not using for the time being, okay, which are alien to it or would interfere with it, are put back for the moment. Yet in reality, all the time, it's an indivisible consciousness which we are, and that has done the work to be done. Since the thing that has to be done, the thing that has to be seen, that and not any fragment of consciousness or any exclusive ignorance in us, is a silent knower and worker. The totality is both Purusha and Prakriti. It is the self as well as the nature. silent knower. Consciousness is there, knower, but it is silent, inactive. And there is a worker also. Okay, and the worker is the Prakriti, is the force. So silent knower, Chit. Worker, Shakti. Or Purusha Prakriti if you want, or spirit and matter. They are all the same. So is it too with this frontal power of concentration of the all consciousness within us, exactly in the same way. So again we have come exactly at 8:34, so we can stop here today and we will do the next one in our valuation of our movements. See, we take a good deal of time to go into each sentence because I find it very interesting. Even now when I am going through that silent knower and worker, okay, suddenly it struck me as an interesting way of putting. Okay, I bid au revoir to everybody. Have a nice day. Yasmin, I'll wait for the full message. Yeah.
Au revoir,
Thank you,
Ranga.
Ranga.
Merci
Au revoir,
beaucoup.
everybody. Have a nice day.